I am very pleased to bring on with me right now my co-host for this event, Charity Wallace, Managing Director of Global Women's Issues at the DFC. Charity, welcome. What amazing news from this announcement.
It is amazing. And we're really excited about the $6 billion goal that we're setting for over the next 3 years at the DFC to empower more women economically. Just such an inspiring discussion that Senior Advisor Trump and Adam had. So thank you so much for participating in the leadership that you provide. It really, we know, and as Ivanka said, the reasons why we're doing this is because investing in women yields one of the best returns, the highest returns. And when we invest in women, we catalyze change. So as I said, I'm particularly thrilled about this ambitious goal that we've set. It's $6 billion over the next 3 years. And the wonderful part about DFC is that all of DFC, starting with our leadership, as you saw, recognizes that catalytic power of investing in women. And we're really proud to set bold goals and mobilize private sector partners to multiply our impact for women's economic empowerment.
Yeah, and as we've already seen, this event is intended to underscore the importance and results of gender lens investing. And through these conversations we're going to have, we'll discuss private sector solutions that are improving economic opportunities for women in Latin America and the Caribbean. And during the COVID-19 pandemic, it is more necessary than ever to invest in women. And that is why we're bringing together these action-oriented partners who help foster and advance frameworks for investing in women in the region. And, so Charity, I'm so excited for this next conversation. Why don't we go ahead and start to tee it up while we get the rest of the folks in here in the green room. So let's kick it off to this first conversation.
Yeah, great. So I know that we're getting all of the panelists ready to participate in this panel. The panel actually is, as Ivanka laid out, there are barriers and solutions to women's economic opportunity, which we'll talk about in this next panel. She also mentioned the access to capital, which is a huge issue for women as it relates to empowerment for them, their ability to own, lead, or be employees. And so the second panel will talk about that. We'll talk about access to capital. We'll talk about the COVID response. That's our third panel today. We'll discuss the rescue, recovery, and resilience and how women have to be a part of that. And then we'll also talk about approaches for achieving stability and sustainability, because we know that women are critical to creating stability. When women reinvest 90% of their income back into their communities and their families, which creates stability and it has a national security impact. And so we'll talk about that as well today. So we have 4 really great panels for everyone. We're so thrilled that you all have joined us today. With regards to the first panel, as I said, identifying barriers and solutions to women's economic opportunity, we know that women's economic opportunity is a human right and a human development concern. It's also a contributor to equitable growth and sustainable development. Women account for 50% of the global working age population. And not surprisingly, research shows that if women participate more equally in the economy, global GDP could increase by 26% or $12 trillion by 2025. In Latin America, women could add an estimated $2.6 trillion to the GDP by 2025 if the gender gap is bridged. Yet despite the recognition of this opportunity that women represent on virtually every global measure, women are more excluded economically than men. And so that's what we're going to be discussing on our panel. We're still waiting for our panelists to come over, but I can give you a little bit of background on them as they do. We'll have the opportunity on our panel to explore the barriers and, more importantly, the solutions to women's economic inclusion and opportunity. And each one of the panelists that I'll be speaking with is personally leading efforts to empower women economically. And so I'll have the privilege of speaking with the Vice President of Colombia, Marta Lucía Ramírez, the First Lady of Honduras, Ana Garcia de Hernández, the Jamaican Ambassador to the United States, Audrey Marks, and the CEO of Women's World Banking, Mary Ellen Iskenderian. So to give a little bit of background, actually Adam and I had the opportunity to speak with the Vice President of Colombia earlier this morning, and just to hear about the amazing work that she has been championing. And one of the things I found interesting was that during Ivanka's trip last year to Latin America, that is actually what inspired the vice president to take on so many incredible initiatives within Colombia to empower women. And I know that's the case for many leaders as well as private sector. It's that recognition that when we empower women economically, we do build stronger futures. And that's why it's called 2X America's Investing in the Future of Women today. So just to give you a little bit of background, the vice president is the first female vice president of Colombia, and she has had a dedicated career in the public sector. In her fight for gender equality, Vice President Ramírez currently presides over the first Colombian Women's Business Council to advise the president on finding opportunities for women's economic development. And I see our panelists are here. That's so great. So I just introduced you, Madam Vice President, and I will start with you as a question. You are championing a number of outstanding initiatives and projects, from a grassroots effort in local communities in Colombia that supports women's economic opportunity directly, to developing a national action plan for implementing programs related to UN Resolution 1325, to an international coalition for women's economic empowerment, and finally, a fund that will raise money for the investments in women-led, women-owned, and women-supporting businesses. So please tell us more about the motivation behind the initiatives and how they will economically empower women in Colombia. And please particularly focus on the fund. So over to you, Madam Vice President.
Thank you, Charity. It's a real pleasure for me to be here. I would like to say good morning to everyone, and of course to my fellow panelists, the Jamaican Ambassador to the United States, Audrey Marks, the First Lady of Honduras, Ana Garcia Carillas, the President and CEO of Women's World Banking, Mary Ellen Iskenderian, and of course, Charity, it's a real pleasure to be here. Let me also thank to the government of the United States, the DFC, and the Concordia for organizing this very important forum, this very important panel in this timely event. In every corner of the world, women are disadvantaged in terms of education, career opportunities, wages, financial inclusion, and the access to technology, all of which are exacerbated by this burden of the unpaid work and the family care. This burden has increased significantly since the start of COVID-19 pandemic. In Colombia, we aim to boost employment and entrepreneurship for women, and of course, we are convinced that if we can support at least 1 million women to become entrepreneurs, we are going to change big opportunities for their families or for their children. We know that women economic empowerment will drive the economy's recovery in Colombia. We are absolutely clear of that. Under the President Ivan Duque leadership, we launch a plan for economic reactivation. It's called Commitment for Colombia, for the future of Colombia, with 4 strategic areas: job creation, green businesses, the commitment on the poorest, and the rural areas development, because it's, of course, rural development is very related with the Colombian peace. That strategy is linked to our priorities on women's economic empowerment. And I would like to share with you two concrete actions. First, last June, it was the 4th of June, for the first time in the history of Colombia, we created the Trust for Entrepreneurship Formalization and Business Strengthening. A trust fund through which Colombian women, business and productive projects will have a specific monetary and technical support. We want to reach 350,000 women, but how are we going to do this? The trust will be managed by a public trustee, which will channel national, international, public, and private resources. These resources will be used to, first, structure and place financial credits for women in businesses via equity, debt, and collateral. Second, by provide training and technical assistance to ensure that women's entrepreneurial initiatives are profitable, scalable, replicable, and sustainable. And third, to take decisions based on data of women's entrepreneurship ecosystems at the national, regional, and sectorial levels. All these financing, technical assistance, and data will be focused in three areas. First, fostering the licit economic opportunities for women in regions that have traditionally been co-opted by illegal economies related with narcotics and the armed groups in Colombia outside the law, of course. This means we will support initiatives of women organizations in this very basis of their civil organizations in these conflict-affected municipalities. Women leaders of human rights, women reincorporated women from armed groups, because you know there are some women who were part of these armed groups, and women victims of sexual violence. Second, we will also support rural women by financing productive projects at subsidized interest rates, providing them technical support and supporting ways to commercialize their products. And third, given that we have an employment rate of young women of 34%. So it's very high, and we are also promoting entrepreneurship in STEM sectors. We would like to educate and to promote businesses for women in science, technology, engineering, mathematics. This is an action that we are developing very hard, mainly in the urban areas, because on rural areas, of course, it's also important, but we are more focused in the rural areas to provide them with these financial resources to become entrepreneurs. Now, the second concrete action I would like to share with you is the Presidential Advisory Board of Colombian Businesswomen, particularly the project of mentorship of women mayors. The advisory board gathers like 145 most outstanding women entrepreneurs of all sectors of the Colombian economy, and today one of their tasks is to mentor the 130 women mayors in Colombia to promote productive projects for women in their regions. Currently, there are 50 businesswomen mentoring 50 women mayors. By December, we expect to have all 130 women mayors of the country being mentored by one Colombian businesswoman and making successful businesses. The financing and development of these projects is extremely important to grant better conditions to women in the region, and this will translate into development and social prosperity. The evidence is clear. What is good for gender equality is also good for the economy, for the society, and of course, for their family. Let me say that in Colombia, we have almost 40% of families which are led by women as a head of families. So it means a lot for the children and for the future of these children. I believe governments and the private sector through public-private partnerships have an important role to play at the local level in inspiring and training young women to be social leaders and entrepreneurs. We welcome this space. And again, thank you very much to all of you, for this opportunity to look forward to working with you all for the future of Colombia, for the future of our region, for the future of the Americas. Because the good for each of the countries of Latin America is going to be good also for the United States and for the future of democracy, for the future of economy in the entire hemisphere that we share. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Madam Vice President. So interesting what you're doing, very important. And to your point, as we strengthen each country, the region becomes more strengthened as well. And women are at the key part of all of that. So it's next my honor to speak with Mrs. Ana Garcia de Hernández, the wife of the President of Honduras. She is a lawyer and a champion for women's empowerment on Honduras. She's taken on a number of really unique initiatives that she's championing as the First Lady. So Mrs. Garcia de Hernández, how are you using your platform, experience, expertise, and your role as First Lady to address the barriers for women's economic inclusion in Honduras? And what are you seeing as the most impactful interventions or solutions?
Hi, buenos dias, good morning to everybody. Good morning, greetings to the panelists. And then let me thank you, best wishes from my husband, President Juan Orlando Hernandez, who is very committed to this important effort. I also want to thank DFC and its president, Adam Bowler, for the invitation to this event, and Concordia as well, and especially for your support to Honduras. We signed a memorandum of understanding with DFC, and your initiative, America Grows. And certainly this vital project called 2X America will promote private sector job creation and massive investment in our country with support for micro and small businesses, especially those owned by women. I also want to recognize the extraordinary leadership of Ivanka Trump in support of the Women Global Development and Prosperity Initiative. Very, very important, and also important to our country. In Honduras, 53% of the population are women. But, and this number may surprise you, 70%, more than 3/4 of the micro enterprises are led by women. In many cases, families depend entirely on these efforts because more than 1/3 of all households are headed by a woman. On the income, the woman received 90% of the income that women receive, 90% of families. So it is clear that investing in the education and empowerment of women guarantees the development of a fairer society with better human capital. From our first day in government, we have been committed to strengthen our policies on gender and human rights, with less talk and more actions. Today, we can point with pride on multiple successful initiatives that work to promote the integral development of women. We have found that the economic empowerment of women is key to reducing the poverty, discrimination, and violence in which many women find themselves, because when they achieve better economic levels, the benefits are also reflected in their families, communities, and of course in the country in general. In the economic areas, we are seeing significant results from efforts to support productivity, access to markets, access to financing, training in technology, and e-commerce and financial education, among other interventions. However, we take an integral approach, and this is very important, but because we have to see the woman as a whole, not just as one part of the woman. We're also seeing enormous positive impact from our projects to prevent violence, to promote social development, sexual and reproductive health as very important. Teen pregnancy prevention is very, very important. Empowerment and self-esteem programs for women and their families, and the prevention of irregular migration and human trafficking. Based on this integral approach, in 2016, we created as a government, we created the presidential program called Ciudad Mujer, City of Woman in English. It is a powerful intervention that delivers a whole of government solution for Honduran women. More than 40 services are provided to women with the support of at least 14 institutions in 6 different approaches. One of these module approaches focuses on economic autonomy. And with that, we have assisted 1,000 women in strengthening their skills while providing access to credit and training in technological ventures. For example, during this pandemic, COVID-19 pandemic, many entrepreneurs have been trained in biosecurity, access to markets through fairs and online business roundtables. The other 5 modules of Ciudad Mujer are dedicated to attention to violence against women, pregnancy prevention and care for adolescents, sexual and reproductive health, collective education, and childcare. Looking at its full range of services, Ciudad Mujer has enabled more than 400,000 women to receive over 850,000 services at the 5 centers that are currently in operation. We will soon be opening 2 more centers, which will enable us to expand our coverage nationwide. In Honduras, we are proud to be a multi-ethnic society, and 2 fundamental sectors in Ciudad Mujer are the indigenous population and the Afro-American or Garifuna population, for which we offer a differentiated strategy and an intercultural approach. A fundamental sector in Ciudad Mujer, it should be noted that of the total number of micro enterprise, as I told you before, 70% are made up for women, and a significant percentage of the informal sector of the economy, while 38.4% of the economically active population are women. Another important program area is to promote financial inclusion. Through the National Banking and Insurance Commission, we are promoting the financial inclusion plan to Honduran women to make sure that the regulatory framework in the financial sector plays a positive role to encourage and support women access to finance services. Also, we have created some of the largest and most effective social development programs under the heading of Vida Mejor, which translates as better life. This targeted anti-poverty program focuses on women to directly support and help empower 1 out of 4 families in Honduras. The Vida Mejor conditional cash transfers directly support almost 300,000 poor families with income, but on the condition that their children go to school and receive medical checkups. This program has a financial inclusion component executed together with Fundación Capital, families in financial education. Also, we have Mejores Familias, Better Families program that provides more than 300,000 families with training for women on essential topic of nutrition, child raising, teen pregnancy prevention in rural areas, personal development and self-esteem, and preventing irregular migration. During this pandemic, Vida Mejor has supported visiting to deliver foods to many families in our country, and great. Also accompanied the home medical visits to prevent families from getting sick from COVID-19. Finally,
you're just doing terrific work.
Thank you. Finally, I just want to say that the COVID-19 pandemic has seriously affected the economic of thousands of families. And today the world faces great challenges to economic recovery. Honduras is not the exception, but there is a reality that has not changed, and that is that if we invest on formation of women, we also invest in the families and in the development of the communities. So thank you
That's right.
again for
Exactly.
inviting me to this important event.
Thank you so much. And thank you for providing such a holistic view of what you're doing in Honduras during this very difficult time, particularly for women. And so it's just amazing to think about. And you talked about this holistic view that you take, the approach that you take to women and how the government has been involved. And as Ivanka was saying, we're taking a whole of government approach as well. And so that's something that's very important as we face these challenging issues in our world. Now I have the opportunity to introduce Ambassador Audrey Marks. She is Jamaica's first female ambassador to the United States and the first individual to hold the position twice in 2 separate terms. She's an entrepreneur by profession. She started and operated 6 businesses in her career. And she also has the distinction of being the first female president of the American Chamber of Commerce of Jamaica. So Ambassador Marks, as a female entrepreneur, you have likely experienced challenges and faced barriers that we are discussing in this panel today. But I'd like you to describe what you believe are the most effective solutions in supporting female entrepreneurs as drivers of the economy and how you're supporting this work as the Jamaican ambassador to the US. So Ambassador Marks.
Thank you. And it's really a pleasure to be here this morning to join this panel. This is such an important work that has been undertaken by DFC, a very important initiative. Our discussions this morning have certainly served to further underscore the need for enhanced support for women entrepreneurs. I agree that women-owned businesses need to provide employment and contribute to the national development agenda. Charity, I was amazed to hear. I thought it was in the region of about 6 to 10%. The statistics you quoted earlier in terms of the impact if women and men were treated equally as entrepreneurs, the global GDP impact and the boost to the global economy in the trillions of dollars. Did you say $10 trillion? Yeah, just amazing.
It's between 12 and 28, depending, but yes, it's over 12 trillion.
It's worth repeating because these statistics are difficult to ignore. This is why this is such an important focus area. So while achieving success as an entrepreneur comes with many pitfalls, the challenges for women are more pronounced. I believe that this event is one step towards addressing the indisputable barriers in the business world. And given women's unequal access to capital, it is therefore essential that special financing arrangements be designed specifically for women. That is why the 2X is so important. There are certain nuances to being a woman in business, and the financing is usually at the core of the difficulties that women have. So to be able to expand from small business ventures to larger enterprises, such initiatives could include micro or small business loans and grants. Apart from financial support, a second very important area is that in some cases women have the know-how, but they need to enhance their technical capacity to address the logistical details on the nuts and bolts of running a business. So they sometimes simply need encouragement from others who are further ahead in the journey to reassure them that they too can become successful entrepreneurs. Thus, we should highlight and push mentorship programs. I was very interested to hear what Madam Vice President mentorship program is about. 150 mayors being mentored by 150 businesswomen. And so that cut across the policymakers and the business persons, because many times as a business person, the policies seem to be to be made without any input, and they then become a source of conflict. So that's a very important initiative, Madam Vice President, and I just want to salute that it is being done in your country. It will help to ensure that women can access financial, technical, and human capital in order to close the gender gap. The second part of your question, as Jamaica's ambassador to the US, I work very closely in three major areas. One, the US-Jamaica bilateral relationship. And in this area, I work with mainly the State Department and the Department of Commerce, and with under the State Department, USAID, and a number of other agencies to make sure that the policy positions in our bilateral agenda will assist women in business. And so far, the US government really has been very supportive of the initiatives that we have worked on to push entrepreneurship and women in business in Jamaica. A second area is with the diaspora. Jamaica has over 1 million Jamaican Americans here in the diaspora. So I worked to push the relationship, especially between Jamaican American women and Jamaicans at home who can work together in business ventures. A third area that is very important for me is trade and investment. And in this area, we work with the US government in trade areas, and specifically with the IFIs, such as the World Bank, the IDB, to push development financing. And so it is very important to me. Today is Jamaica's Independence Day. But I'm here because I think this is one of the most important initiatives that have come out of DFC. And I really want to commend Ms. Trump, Ms. Ivanka Trump, and the CEO, Adam Boulder, for the work that they are doing and this conversation. I think it's my hope that we can collaborate to really use this landmark event to unlock some of the investment opportunities under the umbrella of the 2X initiative, with a view of providing support for women in Jamaica. So I am very much committed to the work that you are doing, and I look forward to our long-term partnership to impact women in business in Jamaica and in the region. And I thank you.
That you're here with us today, all of your experience that you bring to bear, but also we're really excited to be working with you as well and in Jamaica. Now I have the pleasure of introducing Mary Ellen Iskenderian. After 17 years at the IFC, Mary Ellen joined Women's World Banking as the CEO in 2006, and she leads their global team. Women's World Banking is focused on providing low-income women easier accessibility to financial tools, which the ambassador just raised as an issue. It also provides strategic support and technical assistance to over 55 microfinance institutions worldwide. DFC has invested in one of the funds that Women's World Banking has. We invested $25 million into a $100 million Women's World Banking fund, in which 100% of the investments will be women supporting. So Mary Ellen, you serve as the CEO of Women's World Banking, which for the last 40 years has been fighting for gender equality in financial services. I'd love for you to comment on what you're seeing around the world today, especially in the context of the COVID impact. And what are the barriers to financial inclusion for women? And then really, what are the opportunities? So Mary Ellen, over to you.
Thanks so much, Charity. And thank you so much for including me on this prestigious panel. I must say I was a little nervous about joining first ladies and vice presidents and ambassadors. So I'm really grateful that Women's World Banking is included in such illustrious company. Maybe to take a step back about why this has been such an important mission for 40 years, to make sure that low-income women around the developing world have access to financial services so that they can both create safety nets and prosperity. And so we really do this for two principal reasons. One, despite all of the great progress that's been made, including in Latin America in financial inclusion, there is this unbudgeable 9% gender gap in access to finance for women versus men in the developing world. And 9% actually doesn't sound like that big a number, but at the pace of change that we're moving now, it would take 250 years to close that gap, which I don't know about you, but I don't have that kind of time. But what's even worse is that where, technology has been such an important tool in financial inclusion, but where countries have been particularly reliant on technology, unfortunately, you've seen that gap widen. In some places, Pakistan, Bangladesh, you see a gender gap of 28-30% because alongside the differential in women's access to finance is a differential in access to technology. And I hope we'll have some time to talk about that later. But the other reason, and many of the other panelists spoke to this in their remarks, is that when women have not only access to finance, but control over finance and the ability to use financial tools, they do so in ways that have really profound effects on their families, on their communities. We know that children eat better, have better health, are clothed, they go to school, the whole family's health is better. The housing situations are better when women have control over the money, or at least some of the money in the household. And so that seems like a very good reason for Women's World Banking to stay focused on this issue so that we can close the gap. And we do this really in sort of three business lines, three pillars of our strategy. One is, and we are just so thrilled to have the DFC as such a significant investor in our fund. We invest in financial institutions that perhaps are not necessarily serving women at a given moment in time, but are eager to expand that market. And by being an investor, by being at that board table, we can make sure that institution continues to move in that direction. We also work directly with, and not just microfinance institutions, but a growing variety of financial service partners. So mainstream banks, insurance companies, fintechs, and microfinance institutions. But we work with them to make sure that they're providing products and services that women can actually use, that they know how to use, that if they do have a technological aspect to them, that there's not only financial literacy, but digital literacy that's built into the usage of the product. And then the third way we do this, and I also commend the vice president on that fascinating mentorship, cross-sectoral mentorship program that she spoke to, because our third pillar is really around women's leadership. We see some very strong relationships between women in leadership positions of financial institutions or regulatory bodies, and the way those institutions continue to serve women. And so we do that both for financial service providers, but also for regulators. But you talked a little bit about some of the things that we're seeing around the world. And again, some of the panelists have referred to it. The fault lines and inequalities that existed pre-COVID have really been laid bare by the pandemic. We've seen an absolute epidemic in the increase in intimate partner violence, and women have been particularly vulnerable to that. We've seen many women around the world having less access to feminine health products and reproductive health services. As again has been mentioned, unpaid care work, which is always a great barrier, a great gap in women's lives, has increased exponentially. And all of the financial service gaps that we've seen pre-COVID, of perhaps not having savings accounts or insurance, not having those kinds of safety nets, has really been laid bare. We've seen that women are really just one shock away from real financial disaster. And so the work that we're doing, and so many of the initiatives that have been discussed today have been has become even more relevant than ever before. And perhaps I can just say a few words on some of the things that we're particularly focused on and that I was so pleased to hear were incorporated in so many of the initiatives, particularly related to access to finance for women-owned businesses. We know that 43% of small and medium enterprises around the world report an unmet financial needs. In Latin America, that's actually as much as 46%, and women make up well over 2/3 of that unserved MSME population. So focusing on women-owned businesses is really focusing where the need. And very often in many places around the world, there are two very leading barriers that exist. One is a lack of formal identification and being able to really prove legally who you are. And as more and more services, as more and more products, both government and private sector products, move online, having a digital identification becomes even more urgent. In Latin America, perhaps the second barrier, which is a lack of collateral, really becomes a much more urgent need. And we see that women only own 18% of land in Latin America. I have to say, I was even surprised to see that. And in many countries, again, that have made huge step forwards in terms of financial inclusion, like Chile, for example, still, even though they have a community property regime where both men and women can have equal ownership of land, the man is allowed to make any decisions about the disposal of that land without consulting his wife. So there's still some real basic legal barriers to the creation of collateral, which is so essential to access to finance. And I think one other thing I'll just raise, because it is an issue worldwide, but I think one of the studies I read about Latin America was particularly jarring, and that is the issue of gender disaggregated data. We really can't just even have a clue about how to serve women if we don't know where they are, who they are, which bank clients are women, which are not. There was a recent study done of 110 Latin American banks, across the continent, that saw that only about 15 of those banks even bothered to collect their credit portfolio data by gender, whether they were lending to men or to women. But what was even more galling than that is that only about 6 of those 15 banks even bothered to look at the data when they were making credit decisions. So they're collecting it, but then not using it. So if I urged one thing to be done across the board, and even as DFC thinks about making more investments throughout the financial sector, is really pushing hard for those financial institutions to gender disaggregate and to look at what that data says in terms of making lending decisions, because women are very, very good clients. They're better repayers. They're better savers. They buy more insurance globally. They tend to be more loyal. If you don't treat them all that well, they tend to talk about you more as a bad service provider. But if you do win their trust, they'll stay with you as a client. So there's an enormous opportunity for financial service providers, and I would just encourage them to exploit that opportunity, and the initiative that DFC is doubling down on can make that happen. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you, Mary Ellen. That's so great. It was really comprehensive, and I really actually is a call to action at the end, which is terrific, because that's what we're going to be doing next. So we have just a couple minutes left of our panel, and I am so grateful to each one of you for participating today. Everything that you contributed was so helpful. We thought about the mentorship and leadership perspective and the importance of that. We thought about what are the key barriers and then the significant solutions, and some of that is putting that private sector together with this incredible governmental leadership that's shown on this panel as well. So I'm going to offer one of the things that we want to do as part of this event is to provide action. We're results driven at the DFC. And so the last question is just a lightning round question. And I would ask each of the panelists to speak for 30 to 60 seconds. So it really is lightning round, just saying what your recommendation would be to the audience, or if there is a call to action that you have. So I'll start with you, Madam Vice President.
Okay, thank you. Dear investors, leaders, CEO, businessmen, and businesswomen, embrace the change and be part of it. I would like to invite you all to support productive projects and companies owned or led by women through Latin America, but mostly in Colombia. This Trust Fund for Women, Entrepreneurship, Formalization, and Businesses Strengthening is a very good tool. Join us in carrying out concrete measures to enhance women economic empowerment and mitigate the consequences of COVID-19 pandemic and women, because investing in women assures a more sustainable and powerful economic growth. If you consult the webpage, there is a portfolio of projects in different sectors, agribusinesses. Real changes come after real commitment. Both the public and the private sector have a joint responsibility in transforming the world. So how about starting by granting equal economic and financial opportunities to women? Thank you very much for your invitation today.
Thank you so much, Madam Vice President. Really great call to action. Now to you, Madam First Lady, what would your call to action or recommendation be?
It would be to invest in education and empowerment of women, both private and public sector. It's key for the development of the country that women be at the first line, because women can do many things at the same time, taking care of our family, but as well our professions, our public life, leadership. So investing in education and empowering women.
Thank you so much. Really terrific. Thank you. It is true that education is fundamental to women's economic empowerment. And when women are educated, their families are more educated, healthier, and more prosperous. So that's a really great call to action. Ambassador Marks, what would be your recommendation or call to action for the audience? Oh, we can't hear you. You might be on mute. Mary Ellen, we'll go to you. She might have disconnected accidentally. So why don't we go to you?
Thanks so much. So one call to action already, gender disaggregated data is key, but I'd also say if you are a financial service provider, we are not just working with microfinance institutions, we are working across the board. We'd love to welcome you to the Women's World Banking Network. And if you're an investor and if you're serious about making sure that women have access to finance, consider investing alongside the DFC and the Women's World Banking Capital Partners.
Perfect, thank you. And Ambassador Marks, I think we have you back.
I am back, and I just had wanted to use my time to encourage DFC not to let the conversation die today. We have heard very good initiatives and methodologies being carried out by all the panelists in their countries or institutions, and the panels before, the panel before and the panels after will have some very good suggestions. I think the next step should be a working group meeting where we have an involvement from those of us in the region that want to see this initiative being implemented on a faster track. Let us continue working together. So I'm looking forward to today being the start of our conversation, and for us to be able to continue it on a more scheduled basis until we see a level of implementation that is having impact that we all want to see in terms of encouraging women in business in our region. Thank you.
Thank you. That's terrific. And it's a great recommendation. And it's a great call to action for the DFC and all of us here today. So thank you all so much for your time. We appreciate you providing not only your time, but your expertise and your insights in this really important panel to kick us off today. And so we are headed off to the next panel. So thank you all so much. We really appreciate it.
Thank you.